They say the Wild West was unforgiving, but no one knew its cruelty better than Evelyn Thompson, a widow trying to keep her small children fed and sheltered in a land that tested every ounce of courage she possessed. Late one night, while desperate for a few drops of water from a dried-up well, she stumbled upon a dying stranger in the dust. Little did she know that this encounter with the mysterious, bullet-ridden cowboy, rumored to be both dangerous and wealthy, would turn her life upside down. Before the sun rose again, everything Evelyn thought she understood about hope, love, and fortune would change forever. Evelyn Thompson was no stranger to hardship. In the town of Bitterwood Creek, her name was whispered with pity. Poor Mrs. Thompson, people said. She had lost her husband the previous winter to a raging pneumonia that swept through the small settlement. Evelyn was left with 2 children, Jacob and Clara, both under 10, and a ranch that seemed to shrink every time the bank visited. Land taxes soared and threats of foreclosure grew louder. Night in the desert was dangerous, but necessity often drove Evelyn into the darkness. It was a sweltering evening, the moon shining bright in the star-speckled sky, when she grabbed a lantern and ventured toward the old well at the edge of her ranch. The family's water pump had run dry again. She needed to check if the ancient well had any drops left, or if she might find the strength to dig a little deeper before morning. As she approached, the wind kicked up dust devils. Each swirl of sand pricked her eyes. She lifted her skirt and took careful steps, mindful of rattlesnakes. She reached the well and leaned forward with a shaky hope. Her heart sank at the hollow echo of a stone dropping into emptiness. This land had offered no mercy, but something unusual caught her ear. A ragged breath, a weak moan. She froze. The hair on the back of her neck stood up as she realized she was not alone. The sound came from behind a tumbleweed near a cacti grove. Holding the lantern high, she spotted a man lying face down, his body half covered in desert dust, his black coat peppered with bullet holes. Blood stained the dirt beneath him. Fear seized her, but she could not ignore him. She was a widow, yes, and times were desperate, but her conscience was intact. She approached cautiously, trembling as she rolled him onto his back. Through the filth and dried blood, she saw he was handsome, if pale and grim. His breath came in quick, shallow bursts like a dying animal. Without hesitation, she yanked her bandana from her neck and tried to staunch the bleeding from the largest wound somewhere near his ribs. His eyes flickered open, and he hissed in pain, but made no sound. Evelyn wasn't sure if he understood her, but she spoke anyway. "Sir, you're hurt. Let me help you." Her mind raced with questions. Who was this man? Had outlaws done this to him, or was he an outlaw himself? The only certainty was that if she didn't help him soon, he'd die right there under the moonlight. Summoning all her strength, she slipped an arm under his torso and coaxed him to stand. He was tall, towering over her small frame, yet light enough to suggest a recent loss of blood. Step by agonizing step, Evelyn half-dragged, half-supported him across the dusty ground, lantern swinging. By the time she reached her modest cabin, her muscles burned and sweat drenched her dress. She laid him on the couch, unsure if he'd survive the night. Little did she know that this injured stranger, this bullet-ridden unnamed cowboy, would soon become the axis upon which her fate and the fate of Bitterwood Creek would pivot. The Thompson family ranch was far from elaborate. A wooden fence in need of mending stood around a small patch of land for a few chickens and a solitary milk cow that often went dry. A rickety barn tilted dangerously to one side, threatening to collapse with the next strong wind. The main house consisted of a single large room, partitioned by cloth to create a semblance of privacy for Evelyn and her children. The fireplace, always with minimal wood, served for both warmth and cooking. Inside, Evelyn carefully examined her unexpected patient. By lantern light, she took stock of his injuries. Several bullets had grazed him, one had lodged itself beneath his left collarbone, and another somewhere near his rib cage. No doctor lived in Bitterwood Creek. The nearest physician was in the distant town of Durango Wells, a half-day's ride away, if one had a fresh horse, something Evelyn did not possess. Jacob, her 9-year-old, stirred from his slumber hearing the commotion. The boy's eyes widened at the sight of the bleeding stranger. Clara, only 7, clutched her threadbare doll, peering from behind a cloth partition. Evelyn's voice was calm but urgent. "Fetch me the big pot of boiling water." "Hurry, Jacob." He obeyed without question. Evelyn prayed that the rudimentary medical knowledge she had gleaned from caring for her husband might suffice. She set water to boil, took her last spool of thread, and readied a needle by passing it through the flames. The stranger groaned in agony when she pressed a damp cloth to his side, cleaning away the blood and grit. His face was contorted, and sweat beaded on his brow despite the night's chill. "You gotta be still," she murmured, softly, feeling pangs of sympathy. He clenched his teeth but remained silent as she began to suture the open wound. Each loop of thread was a risky gamble that she wouldn't do more harm than good, but she had no choice. Her hands, though trembling inside, worked steadily from years of patching clothes and mending injured farm animals. When the worst of the bleeding was under control, she offered him a few sips of water. His parched lips barely parted to accept the liquid. "Thank you," he finally managed in a raspy whisper, revealing a hint of refinement that made Evelyn suspect he wasn't just any old drifter. Jacob and Clara watched wide-eyed from the corners of the room, curiosity warring with fear. A sense of solemn gravity had settled over the humble cabin. This was no mere traveler stopping by for directions. Danger emanated from him like an aura. He drifted in and out of consciousness as Evelyn worked through the night. While she cleaned and bandaged his wounds, her mind spiraled with questions. Where had he come from? Why was he riddled with bullets? Had he run afoul of outlaws, or perhaps the fearsome Harrington gang that terrorized the region? By the time dawn broke, the cowboy was still breathing, albeit shallowly. He slept fitfully, muttering names in his fever dreams. Douglas Harrington, silver mine, land deeds, wrath, danger. Evelyn could piece together only fragments. She knew of a wealthy magnate named Douglas Harrington who owned mines and banks across the territory. Rumor had it he was vicious when dealing with competition. Was this stranger involved in some land dispute with Harrington, exhausted? Evelyn glanced out the window to see the rising sun. She realized she'd spent the entire night fighting for this man's life. She pushed the thoughts of Harrington from her mind. First, the stranger needed healing. Then she would decide what to do. For a moment, she allowed herself a flicker of hope. Perhaps fate had finally aligned for her to do a simple act of goodness. Yet in the harsh realities of the West, fate often carried a price, and Evelyn was about to discover just how high that price would be. Morning brought its own set of worries. The children's hungry cries clashed with the urgent need to check on the livestock. Evelyn had to gather eggs and milk the cow, or risk having nothing to feed her family. She gently placed a damp cloth on the cowboy's forehead to quell his fever, and whispered a quick prayer for his recovery. Then she instructed Jacob to sit by the stranger's side and call out if anything changed. Outside the desert, morning was already warming up. She hurried through her chores, her back aching and her mind racing. How would she pay the upcoming land tax? She had next to no money left after burying her husband and fending off the bank's collection agents. Her only silver lining was that no official had shown up lately, giving her a brief reprieve. By the time she returned indoors, the cowboy was stirring. His eyes, deep-set and blue, scanned the modest cabin with a mixture of confusion and vigilance. Jacob jumped up, startled, while Clara peeked from behind a table. The stranger attempted to sit up, but winced, pressing a hand to his wounded side. "Careful, you're badly hurt," Evelyn admonished gently. "You lost a lot of blood. I stitched you up the best I could." She offered him a cup of water, which he accepted with trembling hands. He cleared his throat, as though trying to recall a lost memory. "Much obliged, ma'am," he said in a hoarse whisper. "My name is Henry. Henry Colton." Evelyn noted the slight hesitation before he spoke his name. She introduced herself and her children. Suspicion flickered in Henry's gaze, as though he was wary of revealing too much. Evelyn sensed that his caution wasn't aimed at her specifically, but at the entire situation. "Would you mind telling me how you ended up bleeding out near my well?" Evelyn asked as politely as she could, though curiosity gnawed at her. Henry's jaw tensed. He exhaled slowly, clearly deciding how much to share. "I was ambushed on the trail from Durango Wells. Had a disagreement with some men who think they own these parts. Bullets flew and I got pinned down. Barely escaped." Evelyn waited, but he seemed disinclined to elaborate further. Despite his polite tone, there was an undercurrent of controlled anger and a hint of fear. Then he added, "Douglas Harrington's men. That name mean anything to you?" Evelyn nodded, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Everyone around here's heard of Harrington. Richest man for miles, owns the mines. Folks say he doesn't take kindly to competition." Henry stared at the earthen floor. "I found that out the hard way." Before he could continue, a coughing fit racked his body, forcing him to pause. Clara brought him another cup of water, which he accepted with a grateful nod. The innocence in her wide eyes seemed to soften him. "Thank you, little miss." Evelyn noticed the refined manners beneath his rugged exterior. His clothes, though dusty and torn, were of high-quality leather. A silver buckle on his belt was engraved with an ornate C. Nothing about him suggested a typical hired gun or an outlaw. And his speech, though couched in Western drawl, hinted at education. As Henry reclined back on the makeshift pillow, exhaustion overtook him again. "Sorry, ma'am, but I feel like I'm about to pass out," he murmured, eyelids drooping. Evelyn placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Rest. We'll talk later. You're safe here." Outside, the midday sun beat down mercilessly, but inside that humble cabin, a flicker of trust was born. Henry Colton had revealed his name and a shard of his predicament. Little did Evelyn realize that by rescuing this man, she had unknowingly invited a storm of danger and possibility upon her doorstep, one that would test every fiber of her being and forever alter her family's destiny. 2 days passed in an uneasy routine. Evelyn devoted herself to caring for Henry, changing his bandages and warding off infection with herbal teas she prepared from desert sage. The children eyed him with a mixture of fascination and caution. Henry's strength began to return, though he remained too weak to leave bed for long. He offered to pay for his keep, but Evelyn waved away the suggestion. "We'll talk about that when you're better." she said. In truth, she saw no harm in letting him recover. Once he could ride again, he'd be on his way. On the third day, however, Henry's fever spiked. He became delirious. He muttered in his sleep, uttering words that made no sense to the children, but caught Evelyn's sharp attention. Land deeds, silver vein, double-crossed, Harrington, danger, he mumbled. At one point he clutched Evelyn's hand with surprising strength and locked eyes with her. They can't. Take it from me, my father's dream, he rasped before slipping back into delirium. Henry's ravings worried Evelyn. She recalled that name again. Douglas Harrington. She knew from local gossip that Harrington had an iron grip on the region. He owned mines, saloons, and even the local bank that threatened to seize her ranch. If Henry had truly crossed Harrington, then their humble cabin might be in grave danger. In the lawless frontier, Harrington's men could be on her doorstep, with guns drawn at any moment. Her fears were confirmed that very afternoon. While gathering meager vegetables from her dusty garden, she overheard horses approaching. She ducked behind a fence and peered down the narrow road leading to her ranch. 5 armed riders passed, scanning the property with hawk-like eyes. She recognized the black vests and the Silver Star logo pinned to them Harrington's private militia. They carried rifles and looked determined. Evelyn's pulse pounded. She crouched lower, praying they wouldn't spot her or see Henry's horse hidden in the barn. Her prayers were answered. The men continued down the road without dismounting. As they disappeared beyond the next hill, Evelyn rushed back inside. She found Henry propped up on an elbow, trying to stand. Alarm etched her features. "You can't go out there. Harrington's men just rode by." Henry let out a ragged breath, grimacing from the pain in his side. "They must be searching for me." "Yes," Evelyn said solemnly. "They are." Henry exhaled as if his worst fears had been confirmed. "I'm sorry to drag this trouble here, Evelyn." She believed the regret in his voice was genuine. Jacob and Clara trembled, knowing something serious was unfolding. Evelyn guided Henry back to the bed. "You're in no condition to travel. If they come back and find you..." She trailed off, letting the implication settle. Henry's jaw tightened. "I have to leave, or else you and your children will be in danger." Despite her terror, Evelyn found a spark of resolve. "You won't make it a mile in your current state. If Harrington's men catch you out there, they'll kill you on sight." She squeezed his hand gently. "We can't just throw you out to die." A long silence passed between them as they weighed their limited options. "Then I have to hide here," Henry said, each word tasting like bitter defeat. "Just until I'm able to ride." Evelyn nodded, though her chest felt heavy. She had no illusions about what sheltering a fugitive, if that's what he was, would mean. But he had become more than just a dying stranger to her children. He was someone they had cared for, someone whose plight had become intertwined with their own. And if there was one thing Evelyn Thompson held dear, it was loyalty to those in need. Quietly, she moved to bolt the door and draw the curtains. Tonight, a deep unease coiled in her gut. She prayed that Harrington's men would not return, or at least not until Henry had a fighting chance. A week passed, and Henry's wounds slowly improved. Though still weak, he could stand and walk around for short periods. He spent most of his time confined to the cabin, instructing Jacob on how to maintain his guns and showing Clara how to properly feed a horse. Despite the secrecy of his presence, a bond was forming, a strange surrogate father figure for children who had lost their own. Evelyn, meanwhile, battled conflicting emotions. She worried for her family's safety, but seeing the children laugh again stirred her maternal heart. Henry helped with chores when he could determined to repay their kindness. Once, while hauling water from the barn, he nearly collapsed from exhaustion. Evelyn rushed to catch him, and he offered a sheepish smile. For a moment, time seemed to stand still, and an unspoken tenderness flickered between them. Two souls weighed down by life's burdens, but the spectre of Harrington loomed. A swirl of rumors reached them via a traveling peddler named Samuel Henderson, a real figure from out west who roamed from town to town, selling wares and sometimes intelligence. Samuel claimed that Harrington's men were combing the countryside for a renegade who had stolen valuable property deeds. Henry stiffened at the news, confirming that indeed he was the man they sought. Late one evening, as the children slept, Evelyn found Henry awake by the dying embers of the fireplace. He held a worn leather pouch in his hands. Inside, she glimpsed yellowed documents with official seals. "Are those the deeds Harrington wants?" she asked quietly. Henry nodded, jaw tight. "They're my deeds, passed down from my father, Jeremiah Colton. He invested heavily in a silver claim out near the painted mesa. Harrington tried to cheat him out of it. My father died fighting for these papers in court, but Judge Roy Bean, yes, the real law west of the Pecos, once said they were legitimate. Harrington used bribes and threats to overturn the ruling." Henry paused, recalling painful memories. "That's why Harrington wants me dead. As long as I hold these, he can't fully claim the silver veins. But if I can get to a safer territory, maybe over to Tombstone or even Santa Fe, I can rally real legal support from men like Wyatt Earp, who despise Harrington's brand of corruption. These deeds are worth a fortune, Evelyn. Enough to change your life, everyone's life, if properly recognized by the court." Evelyn's heart pounded. "Why are you telling me this?" He looked into her eyes, sincerity and desperation mingling. "You saved my life. I owe you the truth." He exhaled. "I planned to pass through quickly, but now I feel you deserve to know what all this danger is about." A swirl of possibility and dread took hold of Evelyn. On one hand, the deeds offered unimaginable wealth. On the other, crossing Harrington was like poking a sleeping bear. She considered her children, how they struggled daily. If Henry's claim was genuine, perhaps she could end her family's suffering. But any attempt to seize that wealth would put them in lethal jeopardy. She gently traced the edges of the documents with her fingertips, careful not to tear the fragile paper. "Is it really worth all the trouble, Henry?" "The risk?" His eyes flashed. "It's not just the silver. It's justice. My father gave his life to ensure our family's rights weren't trampled. I won't let Harrington bury my legacy." Though the stakes were enormous, Evelyn felt an unexpected stirring hope for the first time in ages. But hope in the Wild West came with a heavy price, especially when it threatened powerful interests. Tomorrow she would have to decide where she stood in this unfolding war. For now, she took a seat beside Henry, the both of them illuminated only by the faint glow of embers, each silently grappling with the question of what they were willing to sacrifice to claim a better life. Word travels quickly on the frontier, and it wasn't long before Harrington's men returned. This time they came in broad daylight, with a formal letter bearing Douglas Harrington's personal seal. Evelyn was outside feeding the chickens when a tall, broad-shouldered envoy dismounted. He tipped his hat with a thin smile that didn't reach his cold eyes. "Ma'am," he said, "the Honorable Mr. Harrington sends his regards." Evelyn tensed but forced a polite smile. "What can I do for him?" The man withdrew an ornate envelope. An invitation. Mr. Harrington is hosting a gathering at his estate in 2 days. He'd be pleased by your presence. The gall of the man, Evelyn nearly scoffed aloud. Everyone knew she had no place among the elites of Bitterwood Creek, least of all at Harrington's high society soirees. Still, she took the envelope, and after the rider left, unfolded it with trembling hands. It read, "Dear Mrs. Evelyn Thompson, I humbly request your attendance at the Harrington estate for an afternoon of refreshments and conversation. Matters of mutual benefit and interest shall be discussed. Warmest regards. Douglas Harrington." Mutual benefit and interest. Evelyn guessed the invitation was a veiled command. If she refused, Harrington might see it as an insult, or worse, a sign of guilt. She also remembered Henry's warnings. Harrington was lethal. There was no question the man suspected Henry Colton might be hiding somewhere near her ranch. Perhaps Harrington intended to flush him out by luring her into the open. That evening, she presented the letter to Henry, who was now strong enough to sit at the kitchen table. He read the letter, face impassive. "He's testing you," Henry said quietly, "and he's letting me know he's on to us." Evelyn's hands shook as she stirred a pot of thin stew. "I can't attend. If I do, he'll see right through me." Henry stared at her intently. "But if you don't go, he'll suspect you even more. We can't afford that." Either. Jacob and Clara glanced between them, sensing the tension. They had grown fond of Henry, who taught them how to whittle small animal figurines from scrap wood. The children understood enough to know Harrington was a danger to them all. Late that night, after the children were asleep, Evelyn and Henry debated their options in hushed tones. Finally, they reached a reluctant consensus Evelyn would attend the gathering. She would act as if she had no secrets to hide. Perhaps she could glean information about Harrington's plans. It was a perilous gamble, but turning down the invitation felt even riskier. Henry squeezed her hand, an unspoken promise of solidarity. In that moment, their relationship subtly shifted. They were no longer just a widow and a stranger. They were allies bound by danger and a fragile spark of hope. Yet in the back of both their minds, the question loomed. How could they outmaneuver a man as powerful as Douglas Harrington, whose wealth and influence stretched further than the endless desert horizon? 2 days later, Evelyn journeyed to the Harrington estate on a borrowed mule from her neighbor old Mrs. Ramirez, who was more than happy to help once she realized Evelyn had no functioning horse. The path was dusty, lined with cactus and sagebrush, leading to an oasis of opulence that rose out of the barren land like a mirage. The Harrington mansion was an imposing 2-story structure with polished oak doors and wide verandas. A pristine white fence surrounded flower gardens, imported from faraway places, roses and lilies that had no business blooming in the harsh desert. Servants bustled about, wearing crisp uniforms and directing visitors to the courtyard. Evelyn's threadbare dress and scuffed boots drew a few disapproving glances. She felt out of place among the finely dressed guests, local landowners, businessmen, even a few officials from Durango Wells. She held her head high, recalling the times her late husband had taken her to modest socials before his untimely death. This was different. The scale, the grandeur, the suffocating power. Finally, she was led to a large drawing room. The windows overlooked a meticulously manicured lawn where Harrington's prized Arabian horses roamed. Stiffly, Evelyn took a seat near a grand piano. She doubted anyone in Bitterwood Creek knew how to play. After a nerve-wracking wait, Douglas Harrington entered. He was a tall man, older than Henry, by at least 2 decades, with sharp, cunning eyes and silver hair brushed back in a style that screamed wealth. He wore a tailored black suit and an air of ownership, as though the entire territory was his birthright. "Mrs. Thompson," he greeted with a polished smile. "I'm so honored you came." He placed a ring-studded hand over hers, and she fought the urge to recoil. She kept her demeanor polite. "Your invitation was kind, Mr. Harrington. I admit I'm curious what business you'd have with me." A glint passed through Harrington's eyes, a predator enjoying the game. "I've heard the bank's been pressuring you about your land. You see, I have influence there. I'm prepared to help remove your financial burden entirely, clear your debts, secure your children's future. In return, I simply need your cooperation." Despite the dryness in her throat, Evelyn managed. And what form would this cooperation take? Harrington's posture straightened. "There's a man named Henry Colton, I suspect may be skulking about Bitterwood Creek causing trouble. It's rumored he's been on your property. Of course, I'd never accuse a lady of harboring a fugitive. However, if you were to recall seeing him or hearing something about his whereabouts, I'd be grateful. The law would be grateful. And I personally would see to it that your financial woes disappear." The enormity of the bribe left Evelyn momentarily speechless. She forced her expression to remain neutral, feigning ignorance. "I've seen no such man, Mr. Harrington. If I do, I'll certainly inform the authorities." Harrington eyed her, searching for any tremor of guilt. She met his gaze, determined not to waver. After a tense moment, he broke into a cordial smile. "I appreciate your honesty, Mrs. Thompson. You're free to mingle among my guests. Enjoy the refreshments. Should you have any memory of Mr. Colton, I trust you'll let me know." She excused herself, feeling suffocated. Outside in the courtyard, she sought fresh air near a rose bush. Her hands shook as she realized just how vulnerable she was. Harrington had the power to erase her debts or ruin her entirely, and he knew it. She spotted James Addison Revis, a real historical land baron, once called the Baron of Arizona, standing in a corner chatting with other wealthy men. His presence underscored the seriousness of land deals in these parts. Men like him and Harrington shaped destinies with the stroke of a pen. Returning home would bring no respite. For now, Evelyn stiffened her spine. She would not betray Henry. And yet Harrington's proposition lingered in her mind like a devil's whisper. If the day came when starvation knocked on her door, would she be strong enough to refuse? Evelyn's nerves were rattled by her visit to Harrington's estate. She recounted everything to Henry upon returning, leaving out no detail, especially Harrington's overt bribe. Henry's lips thinned. "He's trying to buy you, and if that fails, he'll try to scare you." Evelyn's stomach twisted. She had seen the coldness in Harrington's eyes. She knew what it meant. Time was running out. If Henry remained on her ranch much longer, confrontation was inevitable. Early the next evening, Evelyn heard a noise near the barn. She and Henry, both on edge, grabbed shotguns, an old weapon from her late husband's meager arsenal, and Henry's revolver, freshly cleaned. Jacob and Clara were instructed to stay inside, barricading the door behind them. With twilight painting the sky orange and purple, they crept outside. The ranch felt eerily silent. The lone milk cow mooed nervously from her pen. A warm breeze rustled the tumbleweeds. Then they spotted movement, two shadowy figures sliding around the barn's far side. "Stop right there," Henry called, cocking his revolver. The intruders froze. One fired a warning shot, and Henry ducked behind a stack of hay bales. Evelyn backed up, her heart hammering. She aimed her shotgun, though her hands trembled. In the waning light, they could see the men wore black vests, Harrington's militia. One barked, "We know you're here. Colton hand over the deeds or die." Another bullet whizzed past splintering wood near Evelyn. Terror coursed through her veins, but she clenched her jaw and returned fire, the recoil nearly knocking her off her feet. Henry signaled for her to move toward the barn door, seeking better cover. He fired 3 times in quick succession. A scream indicated at least one bullet found its mark. The second intruder cursed and scrambled to drag his wounded partner behind an old wagon. Shouts rang out from the ranch house, Jacob calling out to his mother. Evelyn pressed herself against the barn wall. "Stay inside," she shouted, fighting panic. She had to protect her children. Henry reloaded swiftly. "We can't let them report back. Harrington will come with more men." With a grim expression, he inched around the barn's corner, exchanging fire with the surviving gunman. Evelyn mustered her courage, stepping out just long enough to discharge her shotgun. Bark and dust flew everywhere as the blasts roared through the twilight. When the gunfire ceased, an eerie stillness fell. The wounded intruder lay slumped behind the wagon, groaning. His partner had fled, leaving him behind. Henry approached cautiously, weapon drawn. Evelyn followed, adrenaline and horror swirling in her chest. With blood-stained fingers, the wounded man reached for a pistol, but Henry kicked it away. Gasping for breath, the intruder glared at Henry. "You're a dead man. Colton," he wheezed. Henry's expression hardened. "Why are you after me? Are you just following Harrington's orders?" The man spat flecks of blood, hitting the dirt. "Harrington pays good. You're in the way. You and that widow." His voice gurgled, fading. Evelyn watched in grim fascination as the life drained from the man's eyes. She had never witnessed a killing up close, not even when her husband fought off rustlers. The realization that death had become a daily threat for her family struck her like a thunderbolt. Clara's muffled sobs broke the silence, drifting from the house. Evelyn and Henry exchanged a look, equal parts guilt and relief. They were alive, but at what had cost? "We need to bury him," Evelyn managed voice, quavering. She couldn't leave the body to rot or be found, as that would only bring more trouble. Henry nodded grimly. They set about the grim task under a dim lantern light, hearts pounding with the knowledge that tonight's violence was but a taste of what Harrington would unleash if he discovered Henry's location. The aftermath of the ambush weighed heavily on everyone. Jacob and Clara had seen enough to grasp that their home was no longer safe. Evelyn felt a steely determination rising within her. She refused to be a victim. Henry, however, was burdened by guilt. "I've brought this trouble to your door," he said, rubbing his bruised shoulder. "You and your children don't deserve this." Evelyn forced a small smile. "I can't stand by and let evil men ruin more lives. Harrington's threatened to seize my ranch anyway. This was coming whether you were here or not. Yet survival meant more than defiant words. They needed a plan." Henry felt the crunch of reality. While his wounds had improved, he was still not at full strength. Nevertheless, staying put was suicidal. Harrington now had proof that Henry was hiding on Evelyn's property. That evening, Henry spread out a battered map on the table. It showed trails and passes leading to Santa Fe Tombstone and other territories where he might find legal backing. He pointed to a route crossing the painted mesa. "If I can reach Santa Fe, I can contact Wyatt Earp. He's no friend of Harrington, and he's got a reputation for justice. I also know a judge there, Robert Townsend. who might revalidate my deeds. Evelyn studied the map. The path through Painted Mesa was treacherous bandit country, but it would avoid the main roads that Harrington's men likely patrolled. "It'll take days," she noted quietly, with no guarantee of safety. Henry nodded. "I can't make you come with me. But if Harrington is bent on revenge, your ranch won't be safe once I leave. He might suspect you helped me. At least if you come, we can stick together until we're out of his reach." The children's presence made the choice harder. Could she really uproot them and undertake such a perilous journey? Yet remaining seemed even more dangerous. Harrington would undoubtedly retaliate for the bloodshed on her land. Jacob chimed in, surprising both adults with his firm voice. "Mama, we should go. I don't want to hide under the bed every night, wondering if their men will come again. And we can't let Mr. Colton face them alone." Clara nodded in agreement, clutching her doll. Emotion welled in Evelyn. She realized they had no real future here. Her husband's death had seen to that, and the bank's looming threats continued to overshadow them. Perhaps in Santa Fe there'd be a fresh start, one they never imagined possible. And Henry promised that if his deeds were honored, he'd share the fortune that rightfully belonged to his family. Her jaw set, Evelyn reached out and clasped Henry's hand. "We'll ride with you. For my children's sake, and yours." Henry's eyes flashed with gratitude, but also fear for them. "I'll do all I can to protect you and the kids." They spent the rest of the night preparing. Food, water, and supplies were packed onto the 2 horses Henry had hidden. After the ambush, he had recovered his own mount, a sturdy chestnut mare named Phoenix, plus a spare from the wounded intruder's stash. By daybreak, they were ready. The ranch, with all its memories and heartbreak, would be left behind, possibly forever. At first light, they set out heading east away from Harrington's estate and deeper into the wild, uncharted desert. Henry, a rifle across his saddle, led the way. Evelyn rode behind him. Jacob perched in front of her. Clara nestled in a small wagon pulled by Phoenix. Though fear gnawed at them, a glimmer of hope burned bright. The open horizon beckoned with the promise of a new life and the threat of unimaginable perils. Traversing the Painted Mesa was no small undertaking. The rugged terrain of red-hued cliffs and jagged rock formations stretched for miles, punctuated by canyons that echoed with the howls of coyotes at night. By day, the sun scorched the ground, reflecting off the crimson stones in a blinding glare. Water was scarce, and any miscalculation could lead to dehydration. Henry, familiar with the region's dangers, led them along less traveled paths to avoid Harrington's scouts. Time and again, they skirted precarious ledges or wove through narrow gorges where sunlight scarcely penetrated. The children marveled at the natural beauty, awe temporarily displacing their fears. Clara, her doll in hand, giggled whenever a desert lizard scurried by. Despite the harsh conditions, they made decent progress. At dusk, they found a sheltered alcove against a rock wall, where Evelyn started a small fire using dried sagebrush. The group huddled around it, sharing bits of jerky and the last of their biscuits. The flickering flames cast dancing shadows on the stone, lending a haunted atmosphere to their campsite. Henry unrolled a well-worn bedroll for Evelyn and the children. He himself leaned against a boulder rifle within arm's reach. The threat of bandits or prowling cougars loomed. Their nights were restless, punctuated by every snap of a twig or distant cry of an animal. On the third day, as they navigated a winding canyon, they spotted a rider in the distance. Henry tensed, hand drifting to his gun. Evelyn tightened her hold on the reins, heart pounding. But the rider turned out to be a young prospector named Billy Rawlins, once mentioned in the records of the Santa Fe territory. He greeted them with a mixture of curiosity and caution. "You folks lost Billy?" asked, wiping sweat from his brow. He was traveling light, a pickaxe strapped to his horse. "Ain't many families crossing the painted mesa." Henry gave a vague reply, citing family obligations. Billy frowned but offered some advice. "Be wary of the canyon pass up ahead. Rumor says bandits been roaming there. You might want to go around, though it'll add a day or two to your journey." With that, he rode on, leaving them to decide. Henry sighed and glanced at the children. Jacob and Clara were exhausted. Evelyn's eyes were red from lack of sleep. "We can't risk the bandits," Henry concluded. "We'll take the longer route." Their detour proved taxing. They scaled steep, rocky inclines and descended hazardous slopes. One afternoon, Clara nearly fell from the wagon when a wheel hit a hidden crevice. Evelyn caught her just in time. Another day, a sudden thunderstorm rolled in, drenching them and turning the ground into sticky mud that clung to the horses' hooves. Yet with each obstacle they grew more cohesive as a unit. Evelyn's courage shone as she tackled tasks she never thought herself capable of, like shooting rattlesnakes coiled near their camp. Henry guided them expertly, though exhaustion etched lines on his face. And the children, to their credit, showed surprising resilience. One evening when the children were asleep, Evelyn and Henry sat together, sharing a moment of rare peace beneath a star-laden sky. Henry quietly expressed his gratitude, acknowledging the risk they all faced. Evelyn, in turn, admitted a sense of burgeoning trust in him that went beyond circumstance. In a place as raw and open as the painted mesa stripped of life's luxuries, two souls could see each other's truths with startling clarity. Their luck ran out near the outskirts of Painted Mesa. Scouting a potential water source, Henry and Jacob ventured ahead of Evelyn and Clara. They stumbled upon a hidden camp tucked away in a secluded gully. At first glance it appeared abandoned. Tattered tents and a smoldering fire suggested the occupants had recently departed or were lying in wait. Suddenly, a gunshot cracked. Henry tackled Jacob to the ground, saving the boy from a sniper's bullet. 4 men emerged from behind boulders, rifles aimed. Their leader, a scarred man with greasy hair, sneered. "Well, looky here. We've caught ourselves a fancy cowboy and a kid." Henry's heart pounded. He had the reflex to draw his revolver, but they were outnumbered and pinned down. "Don't shoot!" "The boy is innocent," he called out. Jacob clung to him, trembling. The bandits approached warily. "What's your business here?" demanded their leader, whose name Henry recognized, Gordon Grimes Waller, a notorious outlaw rumored to have done jobs for Harrington in the past. Henry raised his hand slowly. "We're just passing through looking for water. We mean no harm." Behind them, Evelyn and Clara, hearing the gunshot, rushed forward. Evelyn froze at the sight of rifles pointed at Henry and Jacob. Instinctively, she aimed her shotgun, but a bandit slid behind her, snatching the weapon away. Another bandit grabbed Clara, who screamed. "Let her go," Evelyn cried, fear and rage swirling in her chest. But the outlaws took Clara hostage, using her as leverage. Henry realized that one wrong move could doom them all. Gordon Waller prowled around them like a vulture. "I've heard rumors about a certain Henry Colton traveling with a woman and 2 brats. Word is Harrington's offering a handsome bounty for them." "You that fella?" Henry's mind raced. Lying seemed futile. Clearly, these bandits suspected who he was. "Yes," he admitted. "I'm Henry Colton, but Harrington won't pay you half of what you think. He'll kill you just as soon as he kills me." Gordon barked a laugh. "That's a chance I'm willing to take." You got something he wants, some fancy piece of paper. Hand it over, and maybe I'll let the kid go." Evelyn's horrified gaze darted to Henry. They couldn't afford to lose the deeds. It was their only hope of defeating Harrington in court. But neither could they stand by while Clara was threatened. Just then, a thunderous roar echoed off the canyon walls, a landslide triggered by an unexpected shift in the rocky terrain. Everyone scrambled for cover. Boulders crashed down in the distance, throwing a thick cloud of dust into the air, obscuring vision. Seizing the moment, Henry lunged at the bandit holding Clara, wrestling her away. Gordon fired blindly, the bullet missing by inches. Evelyn slammed the butt of her shotgun into the chest of another outlaw, grabbing Jacob's hand. Chaos ensued as the dust cloud blinded all sides. Henry managed to grab Clara and push her toward Evelyn. "Run!" he shouted over the pandemonium. The bandits, coughing and disoriented, fired sporadically. Guided by adrenaline, they fled, weaving through jagged rocks. Jacob stumbled, scraping his knees, but Evelyn hoisted him up. They sprinted until their lungs burned, the shouts of the outlaws growing fainter behind them. When they finally collapsed behind a natural ridge, hearts pounding. Henry did a quick head count: Evelyn, Clara, Jacob. They were all safe if shaken. Bullets still echoed in the distance, but they appeared to have escaped immediate danger. Evelyn cradled Clara, trying to calm her tears. Jacob panted heavily, clutching a bruised elbow. Henry's eyes were aflame with determination. "We have to keep moving," he rasped, checking his revolver. "If they catch us again, they won't miss." Evelyn nodded, her voice trembling. "Let's go." And so they pressed on deeper into the rocky labyrinth. Unbeknownst to them, the bandit Gordon Waller had radioed by messenger in the parlance of the time word of their whereabouts to Harrington's men, setting the stage for an even more dangerous confrontation ahead. But for now, they had eluded capture by the slimmest margin, a testament to their growing bond and unyielding will to survive. After the harrowing escape from the outlaw camp, the family trudged through the final stretch of the painted mesa. Exhaustion weighed on them like a leaden cloak. Henry's wounds had reopened during the confrontation, and although Evelyn did her best to bandage him, his strength flagged each day. The children, though resilient, were equally worn down by days of sparse rations and constant danger. Yet one morning, the rocky horizon gave way to a sweeping vista-green patches hinting at farmland, and beyond that, the distant steeples and adobe buildings of Santa Fe. The sight was like a mirage of salvation. "We're almost there." Henry breathed relief, etching every syllable. Santa Fe was bustling, a stark contrast to the lonely desert. Merchants hawked wares in the plaza, travelers milled about with wagons loaded for trade, and colorful adobe storefronts offered everything from tack supplies to blacksmith services. Evelyn's children gaped at the lively spectacle. They had never seen a place so large or full of energy. Henry guided them to a modest inn near the edge of town. The owner, an older woman named Dolores Chavez, recognized him immediately. "Henry Colton, I thought you'd never show your face around here again." "Those men from Harrington's gang have been sniffing around," she whispered, eyes flicking to Evelyn and the children. Henry offered a weary smile. "We'll need a room or two. Dolores and a place to stable our horses." "Can you manage that discreetly?" Dolores hesitated, then nodded. "You saved my nephew from a beating once. I can't turn you away, but you better be careful." Grateful, they settled in. Evelyn helped Henry up the narrow stairs. Once inside the simple yet clean room, Henry sank onto the bed with a groan. "I need to see Judge Robert Townsend as soon as possible." he said, grimacing through the pain. "We have to file an injunction against Harrington's claim." Evelyn brushed sweat from his brow, concern evident. "You're in no shape to go anywhere right now." "Let me see if I can send word to the judge." That same afternoon, she learned the judge was presiding over a case at the courthouse. With Jacob and Clara in tow, she navigated the bustling streets, scanning the adobe buildings, until she found the courthouse a sturdy structure with an American flag flying overhead. Inside, she pleaded with a clerk to let her see Judge Townsend on urgent matters. The clerk hesitated, but after seeing the desperation in her eyes and hearing Colton's name, he agreed to pass along her request. They returned to the inn and waited. Hours later, a soft rap on their door announced Judge Townsend's arrival. He was a dignified man with a neatly trimmed beard and keen eyes that seemed to pierce lies like a hawk. He greeted Henry cordially, though a hint of concern lined his brow. "I've heard rumors you were shot, that Harrington was after you. Didn't think I'd see you so soon," he said. Henry mustered a weak grin. "Your Honor, we have the deeds, the legitimate ones." He motioned to Evelyn, who produced the battered leather pouch. Townsend carefully unrolled the documents, examining the seals and signatures. "I believe you'll find them in order previously validated by Judge Roy Bean," Henry added. Townsend read through them with studied thoroughness. Finally, he nodded. "They appear valid. If Harrington's men are after you, that means he's worried you'll press your claim. Truth is, most folks in these parts are fed up with Harrington's bullying. I'll hear your case at first light tomorrow, Henry." Evelyn felt a wave of relief, but Townsend's next words brought caution. "However, Harrington has friends in high places even here in Santa Fe. Don't underestimate him. If he learns you're in town, he might strike before we can conclude legal proceedings." Henry nodded grimly. "We'll be ready." That night, Evelyn held the children close, lulled by the unfamiliar sounds of the city. She caught Henry staring at her from across the room. Gratitude in his gaze mixed with trepidation for the battle ahead. Tomorrow, they would confront Harrington in the only arena that might dethrone him court. Whether the law would prevail in a land where might often made right remained to be seen. Sunlight spilled into the Santa Fe courthouse as whispers spread. Henry Colton was challenging Douglas Harrington for control of a silver fortune. Locals packed the benches eager for drama. Judge Robert Townsend presided gaze sharp beneath his gavel. Henry, pale but resolute, rose with a cane. He presented the deeds describing his father's sacrifice and Harrington's campaign of bribery and violence. Evelyn stood by his side recounting the ambushes and Harrington's veiled threats at his estate. Harrington denied everything with practiced arrogance. His lawyer produced forged documents and paid witnesses. The courtroom tensed. Wealth was on trial, and justice hung by a thread. Then the doors burst open. Sheriff Snyder stormed in, with deputies and a limping outlaw, Gordon Waller. "New testimony, Your Honor," Snyder declared. Under oath, Waller confessed that Harrington hired him to kill Henry and seize the deeds. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Harrington erupted in protest, but the judge slammed his gavel. "These actions violate territorial law," Townsend ruled. "The deeds are valid. I order the arrest of Douglas Harrington for conspiracy and attempted murder." Pandemonium followed. Harrington fought the deputies, but they wrestled him down. The crowd erupted in cheers as the mighty tyrant fell. Henry slumped into his chair, exhausted. Evelyn gripped his hand, tears blurring her vision. Justice so rare in the West had found its moment. Outside, Jacob and Clara rushed into their arms. Reporters jotted notes capturing the end of a long, dusty war. Evelyn held her children close. Henry stood beside her, battered but vindicated. They had risked everything, and against all odds, won. The days after the trial blurred in a storm of headlines and whispered reckonings. With Douglas Harrington imprisoned, his once mighty empire cracked. Former associates turned on him, revealing layers of corruption that reached deep into Bitterwood Creek and beyond. Henry wasted no time solidifying his claim. Judge Townsend granted him legal title to the silver vein at Painted Mesa, and investors quickly circled. Henry navigated their offers, carefully determined to preserve his father's legacy. Evelyn struggled to accept his generous proposal, a share in the mine's future profits. At first it felt like too much, but with Jacob's shoes worn thin and the memory of foreclosure threats fresh in her mind, she accepted. It meant safety, stability, a future. The children flourished in Santa Fe's vibrant streets. Laughter returned to their lives. They marveled at market stalls, played with new friends, and slept soundly for the first time in months. One afternoon, Henry brought Evelyn to a modest adobe home shaded by an old mesquite tree. A small fountain gurgled in the courtyard. "I want you and the kids to have this," he said softly. "You saved my life, Evelyn. I want to share mine with you." Tears welled in her eyes. "We've come so far. I'd be honored." Their bond, once forged through fear and survival, blossomed into something steadier, something resembling love. Standing beneath the branches, they held hands, knowing the worst had passed. The next day, Sheriff Snyder brought a letter from Wyatt Earp congratulating Henry. Word of Harrington's downfall had rippled across the territory. The West was still wild, but change felt possible. At sunset, Evelyn stood at the threshold of their new home, watching Jacob and Clara play beneath a sky painted in gold. Henry joined her, his hand finding hers. They had emerged from hardship not unscathed, but unbroken. And in the stillness of that moment, Evelyn knew this was the life her husband would have wanted for them. This was the reward for every sacrifice, every risk. A new chapter was beginning. And so ends the story of poor widow and her children, saved dying rich. Cowboy unaware he will change their lives forever. In a land where justice often felt as rare as water in the desert, one act of kindness brought two worlds together. Evelyn's unwavering compassion saved Henry Colton's life, while his courage and gratitude lifted her and her children out of poverty and fear. Danger stalked them across the Painted Mesa and beyond, yet they stood firm against the tyranny of Douglas Harrington. At last, the courtroom in Santa Fe delivered the verdict that changed their futures, granting them new horizons and a chance at lasting peace. If you found yourself swept up in this journey, feeling the dust of the trail, the heat of gunfights, and the warmth of enduring love, please remember to like this video, share the story with friends who appreciate old Western tales, and subscribe to our channel. Your support keeps our campfire burning bright, and more adventures await just around the bend. Thank you for watching.